The arena shook like a living monster as the crowd screamed for blood. Thousands of voices mixing into one hungry roar. They wanted a show, they wanted fear, they wanted the dragons to tear something apart. And today, that something was a human boy named Aaron. Aaron walked into the arena with chains dragging behind him, each step slow, weak, shaking. He looked like someone the wind could blow away. Thin arms, sunken cheeks, torn clothes hanging off his body like old rags. To the crowd, he looked like the weakest human they had ever seen. A joke, a disappointment, not even worth throwing to a dragon. But the Empire did not care about fairness or strength. The Empire cared about entertainment, control, and fear. And nothing created fear like dragons. The announcer's voice boomed across the stone walls, calling Aaron the traitor, the coward, the useless stable rat. Words meant to shame him. Words meant to make the crowd laugh, and they did laugh, pointing at him as if he were less than human. The Emperor sat high on his golden balcony, eyes cold, fingers tapping the arm of his throne. He looked bored, like this execution was just another chore, just another way to remind the people that weakness had no place in his empire. Guards pushed Aaron forward, shoving him toward the open center of the arena. Dust rose around him, warm and sharp in his nose. He tried to breathe, tried to stay calm, but his heart hammered like a trapped bird. Still, his lips moved quietly, almost without thought. Humming an old tune only he remembered, no one cared about Aaron's song. No one cared that this was not a fight, but a sacrifice. The crowd wanted dragons, and dragons meant death. On the far side of the arena, a giant metal gate rattled. The chains connected to it shook as Beastmasters pulled heavy levers. The sound crawled through the arena like a warning, a deep, grinding noise that made even the bravest spectators lean forward in fear and excitement. Aaron stared at the gate, his eyes wide. He felt the hot breath of something behind it. Something huge, something ancient, something angry. The sand under his feet trembled as a deep rumble echoed from the darkness. The announcer shouted again, "Prepare the pit!" A second gate beneath Aaron's feet opened with a loud metallic crash, revealing a deep drop into the dragon pit below. The ground seemed to disappear from under him, and he stumbled backward, barely catching himself. The crowd cheered louder now. They wanted to see him fall. They wanted to see him scream. Aaron did not scream. He stood still, shaking, breathing hard, but still humming that soft tune his grandmother taught him so long ago. Nobody noticed the effect it had deep underground. The dragons did. The Emperor signaled to the guards, and two soldiers walked forward. They grabbed Aaron by the arms and dragged him to the very edge of the pit. His feet scraped across the sand, his breath quickening as a wave of heat rose from the darkness below. Whispers spread through the arena. A few people said they recognized the song Aaron was humming, but they quickly went quiet, because the old stories were forbidden. Stories about a time when dragons and humans spoke. Stories the Emperor erased from history. Stories only old grandmothers remembered. The guards lifted Aaron like a sack of grain. His heart raced. But his voice did not stop its quiet humming. Maybe from fear, maybe from instinct, maybe from something deeper he did not understand. Then with one final push, the guards threw him down into the pit. The world twisted as Aaron fell, sand and light spun around him, and the roar of the crowd faded into a dull echo. For a moment, he felt weightless. Then he hit the ground hard, air exploding from his lungs, pain shooting through his side. Darkness surrounded him, thick, heavy, alive. The only light came from cracks high above where the arena opened to the sky. Something moved in the shadows, slow, heavy, powerful. A low growl vibrated through the walls like thunder trapped underground. Aaron froze, not daring to breathe. Then two enormous eyes opened in the darkness, glowing like burning coals, staring at him, studying him. The first dragon had awakened. The crowd went silent for a moment, holding their breath, waiting for the kill. Aaron lay in the sand, helpless, afraid, almost ready to close his eyes and accept his fate. But his voice kept humming the song, the one his grandmother whispered on cold nights, the one she said dragons once knew. The dragon stepped forward, its claws sinking into the sand, smoke curling from its nostrils, each breath like a furnace. It lowered its head, ready to strike. But then it stopped, its ears twitched, its eyes narrowed, it listened. And for the first time in the arena's history, The dragon did not attack. It simply watched the weak human boy who should have died already. Up above, the crowd leaned forward in confusion. The Emperor stood, frowning. Something unusual was happening, something impossible, something dangerous. Aaron opened his eyes, saw the dragon pause, and felt a tiny spark of hope. The dragon growled softly, not in anger, but in something else. Something the crowd could not understand. Something the Empire forgot long ago. The faint hum of Aaron's song filled the pit, and the dragon listened. And from the farthest tunnel, deeper in the darkness, something even larger began to move. Something ancient, something powerful, something that should never bow to anyone. But it was coming, because it heard the song too. The story was no longer about a weak human being thrown into the pit. It was about what the dragons remembered and what humans had forgotten. Darkness wrapped around Aaron like a cold blanket, the air thick with heat and the scent of ash. He lay on the rough sand of the dragon pit, breathing hard, every muscle trembling. Overhead, the crowd cheered and booed, confused why the dragon had not already ripped him apart. But down here, far from their eyes, something else was happening. Something the Empire never expected. The young dragon kept circling Aaron slowly, its massive claws scraping lines into the ground. Its glowing eyes were fixed on him, not with hunger, but with something strange, something almost curious. Smoke rolled from its nostrils, yet it held back, unsure. Aaron lay frozen, afraid to move, afraid to speak. But the soft humming still escaped his lips, a gentle thread of sound weaving through the darkness. He did not do it on purpose. It came from fear, from memory. From the last piece of his grandmother he still carried high above. Beastmasters cracked their whips and shouted commands. Their voices echoed down the pit walls, sharp and angry, but the dragons below ignored them. And that frightened the Empire more than anything. Aaron's mind drifted back to the day he was captured. He had been working in the stables behind the arena, sweeping old hay and cleaning saddles, when he heard a soft cry behind a locked iron door. He peeked inside and saw a tiny dragonling, chained, bleeding, trembling. No human was supposed to feel pity for a dragon, but Aaron did. His grandmother told him dragons were not monsters, only reflections of how humans treated them. So he cut the chain, whispered that same old song, and let the little creature escape into the night. He did not know soldiers were watching him, waiting for him to break a rule the Empire treasured more than gold. Now, in the pit, that same old tune drifted from his lips and curled through the air, rising into the cracks of the rocks, sliding into tunnels where deep breaths waited to answer. The young dragon lowered its head, inch by inch, its hot breath rolling over Aaron's face. He smelled smoke, felt heat, felt death hovering just inches away. Yet the dragon held still, listening like a child, hearing a bedtime story. The crowd above grew restless, chanting for blood, shouting for the Emperor to start a new wave of fire punishment. They wanted a show, not a mystery. Aaron's chain rattled as he slowly sat up. His heart pounded like a hammer inside his chest. The dragon's head tilted, watching him with strange recognition. He whispered the final notes of the old song, his voice cracking. But the sound carried strangely far in the underground space. Then the ground shuddered, a deep rumble traveling through stone, dust falling from the ceiling like soft rain. The young dragon backed away, its wings trembling as if something older, something stronger, had called its name. Aaron looked toward the darkest tunnel, and for a moment he saw only blackness, silence, emptiness. Then two enormous lights blinked open, golden and ancient, like suns trapped in a cave. A second rumble rolled through the pit, louder than thunder, deeper than fear. Every dragon in the surrounding tunnels went silent. Every breath froze in Aaron's chest. Above, the Emperor's face shifted from boredom to sudden alertness. He leaned forward, gripping the rail of his balcony as a hush fell across the arena. The oldest dragon, the Empire's unkillable legend, was waking up, dragging its heavy body forward, each step shaking the ground beneath Aaron like the heartbeat of the earth itself. And it was coming because of the song, because of him. Because something inside this weak human boy had touched a memory the Empire had tried to erase. The young dragon stepped back entirely now, lowering its head, almost bowing. Aaron stared toward the deep tunnel, breath shaking, fear rising, but a strange pull inside him whispering that this was not the end. Something bigger was beginning. The crowd held its breath. The Emperor stood frozen. The Beastmasters hesitated, and from the darkness, the oldest dragon finally stepped into the light. Its shadow swallowed Arryn completely. Its gaze burned through the darkness like a promise. The Empire thought they were watching an execution, but the dragons knew they were witnessing a return of something they had not seen in hundreds of years. A human who could make dragons listen, a voice that could wake legends. And the oldest dragon had come to judge him. The oldest dragon stepped into the pit like a storm taking shape. Its body was massive, covered in cracked scales that glowed faintly like dying embers. Each breath it released rolled through the darkness like hot wind. Shaking loose dust from the stone walls, the arena above fell silent, a thick, heavy silence filled with fear, curiosity, and something deeper. Arryn felt the sand tremble under him as the ancient beast approached. He tried to stand, but his legs shook too hard. His hands dug into the sand for balance, but nothing could prepare him for the sight rising before him. The dragon was older than any building in the Empire. Older than the arena itself, its wings were torn in places. Scars like silver rivers ran across its chest, and yet it carried a strength that felt unbreakable. The young dragon, who had first approached Arryn, backed away now, bowing its head, letting out a soft rumble like a respectful greeting. Other shapes moved in the tunnels, smaller dragons watching from the shadows. Their eyes glowed, waiting for the Ancient One to decide the strange human boy's fate. Above, the Emperor leaned forward, no longer bored. His eyes narrowed as he watched the impossible unfold. Even his own beastmasters stepped back from the pit edge, gripping their chains with trembling hands. The oldest dragon lowered its head toward Arryn. Moving slowly, like a mountain bowing, the heat from its breath washed over him. Burning his skin without touching it, Arryn swallowed hard, his voice shaking as he continued humming the old song. That tiny sound, weak but steady, echoed strangely in the pit. It bounced off the stone walls and filled the underground space with a soft, haunting melody. The dragon's eyes widened, not in anger, but in recognition. It leaned closer until Arryn could see every crack in its ancient scales, every scar carved by battles older than the Empire. Its pupils narrowed, studying him, scanning him, almost searching inside him. The young dragon rumbled again, as if telling its elder that this human was different. Arryn felt his throat tighten, fear clawing at him. But something inside him, something old, something familiar, kept him singing. The Emperor raised one hand, ready to give an order, but he hesitated, because he knew something had changed. The crowd whispered nervously. Confused, angry, afraid, they wanted violence, not strange, quiet moments between human and beast. They shouted for the dragons to attack, shouted for the Emperor to force a kill. But none of the dragons moved. The pit had chosen silence. The oldest dragon finally released a low growl, not loud, not threatening, but deep enough that Arryn felt it inside his bones. Then, something happened that none of the thousands watching would ever forget. The oldest dragon lowered its entire body until its snout touched the ground. Its wings folded tightly against its sides. Its massive head bowed. The arena gasped as one. The Emperor's face drained of color. His guards froze, hands gripping their weapons but not daring to move. The ancient dragon, the monster used by the Empire to win wars, the creature feared in every village and every battlefield, was bowing to the weakest human they had ever thrown into the pit. Arryn's breath caught in his throat. He stared at the dragon, speechless, unsure if he should run, stand, or close his eyes and pretend this was not real. The sand vibrated with the dragon's slow, heavy breaths, but the message was clear. It was greeting him, accepting him, recognizing something inside him. Something the Empire had forgotten existed. Above, panic spread among the officials. The high priests began shouting that this was a curse, a sign of rebellion, a forbidden bond. They demanded the Emperor execute Arryn immediately before the dragons turned against them. Beastmasters cracked their whips again, faster, louder, trying desperately to force the dragons to attack. But the dragons did not obey, not even a twitch. The oldest dragon lifted its head slightly and released a thunderous roar. A roar so loud it made guards cover their ears and fall to their knees. Sand burst into the air, banners ripped from their poles, and birds scattered from the arena roof. But the roar was not directed at Arryn. It was directed at the humans above, a warning, a threat, a promise. Arin felt something stir inside his mind. A strange warmth, a strange voice. It was deep, echoing, ancient, speaking in the same forgotten tongue his grandmother used to whisper. "You carry the old voice," the dragon's presence seemed to say. "You carry the song that was stolen." Arin flinched, not because the voice frightened him, but because it felt too familiar, too close, like hearing a memory he never lived. The dragons in the tunnels bowed their heads, one after another, wings folding, bodies sinking low. The Emperor tried to shout orders, but his own guards hesitated, fear rooting them to the ground. Arin looked up, saw thousands of eyes staring at him, some filled with fear, some filled with hatred, some filled with awe. He had fallen into the pit as the weakest human, the smallest, the sickest, the one nobody respected, but now the dragons listened to him. Something inside the deep tunnels moved again. Louder this time, another ancient presence stirring, responding to the song only Arin could sing. The crowd trembled. The Emperor clenched his fists. The dragons waited, and Arin realized something terrifying, something powerful, something life-changing. This was not the end of his execution. This was only the beginning of a war he never wanted. A war the Empire could no longer control, because the dragons had chosen him, and the Empire knew it. The oldest dragon towered over the pit like a moving mountain, its massive wings folded tight against its scarred body, its breath rising in hot waves that shimmered through the dark air. Every eye in the arena watched in frozen fear as the creature lowered its head toward the weak human boy the Empire had thrown away. Arin stood still, barely breathing. His knees shook, his chains rattled softly. But his voice did not fall silent. The old song continued as a faint hum, fragile yet steady, floating through the pit like a thread of forgotten magic. The ancient dragon exhaled slowly, its rumble spreading through stone and air alike. It leaned closer, until its snout hovered just inches above Arin's face. The heat was intense, like standing beside a furnace. But the dragon did not burn him, did not crush him, did not tear him apart. Instead, it bowed again, deeper than before, lowering its whole body in a gesture no human alive had ever seen. High above, the crowd gasped in disbelief. The Emperor rose from his golden throne, his expression frozen between horror and rage. He understood the danger instantly. Dragons never bowed, not to humans, not to empires, not to anyone. If the oldest dragon bowed, the others would follow. If dragons followed a human, the Empire would lose everything. Whispers spread like wildfire. People cried out. Priests shouted curses. Soldiers reached for their weapons with trembling hands. Yet no one dared fire into the pit, because the old dragon's last roar still echoed in their bones. Arin stared up at the massive creature, still humming, but now with a strange calm settling over him. A gentle warmth spread through his chest. Like the dragon's breath was not heat, but understanding. Something ancient recognizing something lost. Another dragon stepped from the tunnel, smaller but still huge, and bowed as well. Then another, then another. Their eyes glowed with the same strange recognition, all of them lowering their heads toward the boy the Empire called the weakest. The Emperor shouted for the Beastmasters to intervene. His voice cracked with fear, but the Beastmasters did not move. Their whips hung useless in their hands. Their chains rattled as they backed away from the pit edge. Some fell to their knees, others simply turned and ran. The old dragon finally lifted its head. Staring directly into Arin's eyes, in that moment, Arin felt something inside him shift, like a door opening in his mind. A voice echoed through him, deep and powerful, speaking in the same ancient language his grandmother taught him. "You carry the voice of the speakers," the dragon's presence whispered, the line thought lost. Arin shook, not from fear but from the weight of those words. He barely understood them, but something in his heart responded. He felt a pull, a connection, a bond that stretched across time and memory. Above, chaos exploded. Priests screamed for the Emperor to kill the boy before the dragons claimed him. Soldiers raised crossbows and ballistae. Desperate to restore control, the Emperor hesitated, torn between fear of the dragons and fear of losing authority. Arin's humming grew louder without him meaning to. His voice trembled, but carried across the pit, soft yet powerful. The oldest dragon answered with a low, rolling song of its own, a sound filled with age and sorrow and strength. The other dragons joined, their voices rising in a chorus that shook the entire arena. The walls vibrated, Sand jumped from the floor. The air felt alive, charged. The Emperor stumbled backward, covering his ears. Aryn stood in the center of the storm of sound, the only human the dragons did not fear. The only voice they seemed to follow, and in that moment, the Empire realized something terrifying. This was no accident, no mistake, no weakness. The dragons had chosen, and they had chosen him. The weakest human was no longer powerless. He was the center of a force the Empire could not control. And as the dragon song echoed through the arena, everyone understood one truth. Nothing in the Empire would ever be the same again. The arena shook under the weight of dragon voices, a deep rolling echo that climbed the stone walls and rattled the steel weapons in every soldier's hand. The oldest dragon stood over Aryn like a living fortress, its body glowing with faint fire under cracked scales, its massive wings trembled with power. Ready to strike, ready to defend, but Aryn did not move. He stood at the center of the pit, chains at his wrists, sand sticking to his skin, his heartbeat loud in his ears. His voice hummed the last fading notes of the ancient song, and even in the chaos, the dragons listened. Above, the Emperor snapped, fear breaking through his cold mask. He pointed at Aryn and shouted for his soldiers to fire. Crossbows stretched, bolts clicked into place. Archers steadied, shaking hands. The crowd gasped, waiting for the moment blood would spill and fire would fall. The first bolt flew. Aryn's eyes widened. He could not run, couldn't dodge, couldn't even scream, but he didn't have to. The young dragon who first approached him lunged forward with a roar that shook the sand. Its wings shielded Aryn with a crack of impact. The bolt buried deep into the dragon's scales, and the creature roared in pain. That roar changed everything. The dragons who had bowed rose together, wings snapping open, bodies lowering into fighting stances. Their growls rolled like thunderstorms, anger shaking through the entire pit. The Emperor screamed new orders. Soldiers panicked, ballista crews scrambled, some fired without aim, bolts flying wild, bouncing off dragon armor, slamming into walls, sending sparks across the arena floor. The oldest dragon lifted its head, and the air heated instantly. The ground cracked under its feet. Small stones lifted from the sand, as if pulled by invisible force. Then fire burst forward. A huge wall of flame shot across the pit, roaring like a river of burning wind. It did not hit the crowd, did not incinerate soldiers. Instead, it struck the giant siege weapons aimed at Aryn, melting iron, shattering wood, snapping ropes, turning war machines into glowing puddles of metal. The arena filled with smoke, screams and falling stone. People pushed and stumbled, trying to run from a disaster they never expected. Aryn covered his face as heat washed over him, but the dragons surrounded him like a living shield. Their bodies blocked the worst of the fire. Their wings curved protectively around him. The Emperor watched in horror as the dragons obeyed none of his commands. Their loyalty belonged to someone else now, someone he never considered a threat. Aryn felt a voice in his mind again, the voice of the oldest dragon. Calm, powerful, heavy like the earth itself. Climb, it whispered. Aryn hesitated, breath shaking. Climb, little speaker, the voice repeated. Show them your place. Aryn reached forward, hands trembling, and touched the dragon's rough scales. Heat pulsed beneath them, but it did not burn him. He climbed onto the ancient creature's bowed head, feeling its strength beneath him, feeling every muscle, every breath, every heartbeat. When he rose above the dragons, the crowd saw him clearly, standing where no human had ever stood. A boy they called the weakest, a human they sentenced to die, now commanding the respect of dragons older than nations. The smoke cleared just enough for the Emperor to meet Aryn's eyes, and in that moment, the Empire understood the truth. This was no execution, this was a beginning, and the weakest human was no longer weak. The arena still smoked from the flames. Broken stone and melted iron scattered like fallen bones across the sand. The crowd had stopped screaming, stopped booing, stopped breathing. They watched in stunned silence as the dragons formed a circle around Aryn, their wings half raised, their eyes glowing, guarding him like he was something sacred. On the Emperor's balcony, soldiers gathered around their ruler, faces pale, armor shaking. None of them understood how the weakest human had turned into the center of a power they could not command. None of them dared step closer. The Emperor slammed his hand on the railing, fury burning through his fear. He ordered his advisors to bring chains, magic seals, anything that could break this strange connection. But his advisors whispered to one another, afraid, unsure if the old magic could be challenged so easily. Down in the pit, the oldest dragon lowered its head again, its eyes glowing like molten gold. Arin stayed on its massive skull, feeling the vibration of the dragon's breath under his feet. His heart beat fast, but his voice stayed quiet, steady, the ancient song living inside him. The dragon's voice entered his mind again, deep and heavy. "Look around, little speaker. See what the Empire hid!" Arin blinked as visions flashed inside his head, visions not his own. He saw humans walking beside dragons, not as enemies, but as brothers. He saw an order of humans, the speakers, guiding dragons and keeping peace between cities and mountains. He saw humans and dragons sharing words, sharing strength, sharing trust. Then the visions darkened. A past emperor, long dead now, turned against the speakers. He feared their bond with dragons, feared their ability to challenge his rule. He ordered them hunted, burned their scrolls, destroyed their songs. Dragons were chained, beaten, forced into war, forced into the arena, and the world forgot what they once shared. Arin gasped as the vision ended, sweat cold on his skin. His grandmother's voice echoed in his memory. "Remember our song, child. Our promise is not gone," the Emperor shouted again, demanding Arin's surrender, demanding the dragons kneel. But the dragons growled in answer, their eyes turning toward the balcony with warning heat. The oldest dragon's voice filled Arin's thoughts once more. "Speak, little one. Tell them the truth they buried." Arin climbed to his feet on the dragon's head. Trembling, he faced the Emperor, his voice shaking but strong. He spoke not in anger but in simple words, words the whole arena could understand. "The Empire lied," Arin said. "Humans and dragons were not enemies. You made them enemies. You destroyed the speakers." Gasps spread through the crowd. Priests shouted for him to be silenced. Soldiers readied their crossbows, but the dragons roared at once, a thunder that cracked stone and silenced fear. Arin kept going. No more chains, no more games. No more lies. The Emperor's eyes burned with hatred, but there was fear behind it. He whispered an order to his personal guards, the ones hidden in the shadows. A quiet command meant to kill Arin before the truth spread. But the dragons heard it. They always heard everything. And the oldest dragon's voice rumbled like a storm rising. The next move they make decides the fate of their empire. The tension sharpened like a blade. One wrong step, one wrong order, and the war between humans and dragons would begin in the next breath. The arena stood in ruins, smoke drifting through broken pillars, the air heavy with fear and fire. Thousands of eyes locked on Arin, the weakest human they once mocked. Now standing on the head of the oldest dragon, like a symbol the Empire could not destroy. The dragons surrounded him, their wings curved like shields, their growls low and steady, ready to strike at the first hint of danger. High on the balcony, the Emperor clenched the railing, rage boiling under his startled breath. He whispered commands to his hidden guards. Men dressed in dark armor, trained to kill without hesitation. They moved through the shadows like shadows themselves, bows drawn, blades ready, their target a thin boy with chains on his wrists. The oldest dragon lifted its head slightly, its golden eyes narrowing. "They think you are helpless," the dragon's voice rumbled inside Arin's mind. "They do not understand who you are." Arin's heart pounded, but he did not step back. He looked up at the Emperor, at the soldiers. In the crowd, full of fear and confusion, he felt the weight of every dragon's gaze on him, trusting him, expecting him to speak for them. "Stop hiding!" Arin called out, his voice echoing across the cracked stone. "If you want to kill me, then show your face." The hidden guards froze. Stunned, the Emperor's plan was no longer silent. Every eye in the arena turned toward him. The Emperor raised his hand to command the attack anyway. But before he could speak, every dragon in the arena roared at once. A roar so powerful, it shook the balcony, knocked soldiers off their feet. Inzent banners flying like leaves in a storm. The oldest dragon took a single step forward, cracking the stone beneath its claws. Its voice echoed inside every mind in the arena, human and dragon alike. "Choose wisely. Ruler of men," silence followed, thick and dangerous. The Emperor's guards hesitated, crossbows shaking in their hands. No soldier wanted to be the first to fire. No one wanted to challenge dragons that could melt stone with a breath. Erin took a deep breath, his voice calm but sharp. No more killing, no more lies, the speakers are not gone. He placed a hand on the dragon's scarred scales. And the dragons are not slaves, the crowd murmured. Fear turning into something new, hope, curiosity, doubt, questions spreading faster than the Emperor's orders. People looked at Erin not as a weak boy, but as someone chosen by power, older than the Empire. The Emperor tried one last time to shout his command, but his voice cracked, drowned beneath the thunder of dragon wings. The oldest dragon extended its neck. "Come!" it whispered to Erin. "The sky waits for you." Erin climbed higher, gripping the spikes along the dragon's massive head. The creature stretched its wings, flames drifting from its jaws like embers, ready to rise. With a single earth-shaking leap, the oldest dragon launched into the air. The others followed. A storm of wings lifting Erin far above the arena that was meant to be his grave. The crowd watched in awe as the weakest human rose into the sky. Carried by legends, a boy marked for death. Now the first speaker reborn, and as the dragon soared over the Empire, everyone below understood one truth: a new age had begun, and it did not belong to the Emperor. It belonged to the boy the dragons chose.